All right. So I'd like to throw it to Ashley. Ashley, who do we have here today? Who's joining us? And by the way, this is our first two-person guest situation officially.
Yes, we designed this anticipating this moment, so thank you for being our first.
Yeah. And that's actually really true is, you two guys especially have been really inspirational to us. We really more deeply connected with the two of you just as we were kind of diving into this multifaceted platform. So there really is a lot of organic inspiration really from you two guys especially. So this is kind of like a quantum moment, you two guys being here. So we're really grateful.
It's an honor. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So I'd like to introduce Jared Owens and Gregory Thornbury. So we met you both at a tour of the Arts Incubator Program Silver Art Projects, where you're a resident artist, and Gregory, you're running the program there.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'd love if you could both tell us a little bit about how you met. What was the first interaction, and we can go into it from there.
Well, I was minding my own business as at the New York Academy of Art, which is not far from the studio in Tribeca, and we used to have these Jeffersonian dinners that I would have with one of our patrons who had this amazing rooftop situation in Tribeca, and a member of the Silverstein family was there, Corey Silverstein, and he said, I'd been wanting to meet him because I'd heard a lot about silver art, and the first person that he introduced me to was Jared Owens, and
Wow.
he's sort of the Maharishi of silver art, and so it was not long after I met Corey that I met Jared, and I pretty soon found out that he was sort of the heartbeat and the through line of the history of the program. And what recollections do you have of that first meeting, Jared?
Yes. So one day he just popped up in the studio, and I was already a senior fellow. I'd been there for 2 years, I believe, before that day. And we were looking for a director. And Corey said to me, "This is going to be the new director." I was like, "Wow!" So then I started looking up his background. I said, "Oh my God!" I said, "He's like, he's got pretty, he's been in New York City for a long time, doing what he's doing at the Academy, and now we're going to have all of his experience to help us at Silver Art Projects, where we really needed that, because we're still fledgling even now. And to meet him with all his experience and all his know-how, he's like my mentor when it comes to development and learning how to navigate the philanthropic heartbeat of New York City, so to speak.
Oh, shucks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jared.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, and Jared, just in the short time we've been connected, you've obviously been a mentor to so many, and we'll get into that a little bit, but I do feel like I was really fascinated, Gregory, by your history too. And I think a little bit of that journey to bring you to Silver Arts Project would be interesting for people. Let's go kind of far back with you a little bit right now. Your history wasn't always with art strictly, but give us a little sort of Gregory rundown. Take us back a little bit, where you grew up, how you got fascinated in various sort of schools of thought, if you will, and then kind of take us to Silver Arts. But take us on your journey for a little bit, because I do think it's pretty fascinating.
Okay, I will do my best. We'll try to keep this pithy, poignant, and trenchant. I don't want to drone on and on about my autobiography. But yes, I was born in central Pennsylvania, and I still use the whole word Pennsylvania.
Thank you.
Everyone else from there says I'm from PA, which I never got. Nobody says I'm from KY or I'm from VT. But central Pennsylvania, and as you might know, Pennsylvania is Pittsburgh in the west, Philadelphia in the east, and Alabama in the middle. And I'm definitely from the Alabama part, Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. I was born at the Evangelical Community Hospital in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, to a pastor, a clergyman. My father, John Thornbury, was the country parson of the town. As Nietzsche once said of his father, he was the perfect picture of a country parson, adorned with all the virtues of a Christian. So I grew up in that environment. My dad was, I would call him a Jimmy Carter evangelical.
All right.
and it's hard in this landscape, political landscape, to try to separate what people now think of as evangelicals or whatever to a time when evangelicals were pro-abortion and very much about the migrant crisis and everything. But my dad was pretty much there. But he was also a very educated man for a preacher. He had multiple degrees. He had a doctoral degree. He was well read in history and philosophy and theology. But it was a strange way of growing up. It's sort of like being a child actor, because my parents, as the leaders of this congregation, it was a democratic style. It was American Baptist, which is different than the Southern Baptist Convention. And they...
What's the crucial difference there?
Well, the American Baptist Convention, the Southern Baptist Convention parted ways over slavery.
Yes,
In the middle of the 19th century.
Pretty crucial.
So back then it was Northern Baptist and then Southern Baptist,
Right,
and so, the rest is literally history. But the church voted every January on whether or not my parents would continue, a democratic vote. I later learned out that this is highly unusual. So they were always wanting to make sure that, we kept up appearances. We were the perfect little Christian kids. I have a sister who's 3 years my senior. And my home was just suffused with, talking about heady theological concepts was as normal and concrete to talk about at the dinner table as go to the corner store and get a loaf of bread. And so when you're growing up like that, you just assume that what your parents are telling you is the way the world is. And I continued on that path for a long time. I never wanted to be a preacher, but I did like the idea of, being a theologian or a philosopher. So I had various different crises of faith along the way, and I was able to sort of stave them off gamely as time went on, but I went on to do a PhD in philosophy of religion. As you know, in academia, and it's even worse now than when I started eons ago, if you get a job offer somewhere, you go. Like there's no, unless you've already, won a MacArthur Genius Award or, has had some kind of famous publication. So I wound up at a university in Tennessee, historically affiliated with the Southern Baptist Convention. And I was a philosophy professor and theology dean for 15 years. And I very much liked that. I didn't quite always get the South because I grew up in Pennsylvania, but both of my parents are Southerners. My father's from Kentucky, and my mother is from southeast Arkansas, and it doesn't get any more south than that.
No doubt.
And so I had done my PhD. I was teaching philosophy. And as happens with many people who are in faculty positions like that, there came a time in which the dark side came and said, we think you should turn in your turtleneck and tweed for pinstripes, and you should, be an administrator.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Yeah. Famous last...
But Gregory,
famous last words.
is there a secret compliment in there in your administrative abilities too? You have all these other abilities, but did they see that there was a leadership element and organizational component? Was it that too? Did they need you there, or were they saying, hey, this guy's maybe a little spicy, maybe a little too spicy? So what was it there?
I think what happened was I was actually the chair of the search for the new dean of the school that I was a faculty member in. And I think that my fellow colleagues kind of like, I think we'd rather have somebody that we know and trust, and, so they sort of went into a rump Congress and, elected me and made a recommendation to the administration. So I don't know how much of it was based upon my acuity as an administrator or as a leader, but it happened. And I was very happy doing that because I don't mean to say this in any way that is condescending towards academic life, but it was sort of like the Shire. And what an administrator does is they're like the Dunedain in the Lord of the Rings. They patrol the borders of the Shire to make sure that the hobbits stay healthy and happy, and they can smoke their pipe weed, and they can drink their mead, and so that's what a university is like. That's a lot like what an arts residency is like. It's what so everywhere that I've gone has sort of had that aspect of it, is like there's something really wonderful happening here. So along the way, I get bored easily. And so I got a call from a friend of mine that said they were nominating me to be the president of this college in downtown New York, the King's College. And I thought for sure I had 0.0 chance of getting this job because I didn't look the part. At the time, I was playing in a rockabilly band with the son of Carl Perkins. My hair was longer than it is now, and they would, I didn't really play to type at all as sort of like this, supposedly conservative thinker. I sort of looked like Jarvis Cocker from Pulp, and
we're gonna pull up all those photos.
Yeah, you can pull them up. Although I don't have my dark glasses on, but I have gotten mistaken for Jarvis once or twice. But I kept interviewing at this thing, and lo and behold, it just so happened that I was one of the last two candidates to interview, and people would ask me why my hair was so long. I used the old Larry Norman line: "I grew it out long to make room for my brain." But they elected me to be the president of this college, which was a wild ride and a story for another time. But when I came to New York, my best friend, who was a former student of mine, philosophy student, is a painter, and he had just moved to New York. That's when I really started plugging into, I had taught aesthetic courses before. I had studied the history of art, but being in New York is a whole different kettle of fish. And I realized that my friend Johnny could do in one painting what it would have taken me hundreds of lectures to try to convey to somebody. I'll leave it here, and you feel free to follow up if you want to. I don't want to bore people, but I saw the toxic orange nuclear cloud rising over Guam and approaching the mainland. And a lot of my donors at this college were, one by one, bowed the knee to he who shall not be named. And so I just I don't want to do this anymore. So I quit. And that's when I went to the New York Academy of Art. David Kratz, who just recently retired as the president there, was a phenomenal leader. He had at that point been there for 10 years. And he said, I need somebody to help me run the school. I want to paint. I want to grow the board. And so I was doing that for 5 years. And now I'm the director of silver art. And it's not hard to get motivated to go to work every morning because I'm working with some of the most talented, capable, and intelligent, not only artists, but people on planet Earth. And so that brings us here today with Kurt and Ashley.
You did a great job.
Okay.
I do feel like it's a good opportunity for Jared to maybe, when you met Gregory and found out that he would be sort of doing what he does there and being administrative, but being a leader, sort of being a coach, being a bit of a curator, a connector, you do a lot of things over there. But being already a senior fellow, as I understand, and the responsibility you have to look out for that program, tell me about your sort of first impressions there and how you guys maybe connected. Maybe there was a way where you connected early and you understand that you could be serious collaborators and allies for each other, and just in terms of sort of running this program too. So Jared, take us to that rooftop and give us a first impression of Gregory, and maybe where that conversation or how that conversation took place in terms of what does it mean to sort of steward that program. So take us to that rooftop.
Yeah, well, I mean, for me, basically, we're both on the same mission. So when you have somebody that's on the same page as you, and you guys have like a clear vision of where you want to go, it makes it a lot easier than just having somebody that doesn't know what they're doing, or they only know one aspect of it. But you need to have a broad understanding of philanthropy and how to generate enough revenue to keep this thing going. And at first, of course, you're nervous when somebody new comes in, but then when you see all the connectivity that happens around you, and all the new people you meet that are potential donors to this incredible thing that we're doing, it's self-explanatory. There's just we wake up, we text each other, we're just like, what do we got today? It's really super organic. Like there's no, and I don't think there's like a starting point that I could point to and say like when I realized
we text like high school girlfriends.
Yeah, we do.
Nice. Jared, was Gregory in like a kind of a rockabilly thing? Was he in his sweet sort of suits at the time? Do you recall that?
Well, I stopped. You know what? I used to go by appearances, and still, as human beings, we do that. It's the most wrong thing to do. One time I crept up on an ATM. I learned this lesson years ago. I was in the village. This guy had like these beat up sneakers on. His T-shirt was ripped, and he went to the ATM, and he took out a couple of dollars, and the screen didn't clear yet. And I saw what he had in his balance, and it was like $6 million. I was like, I was like, what the?
Don't judge.
I was like, I don't need to ever do that again. Like, and then he just pulled off on his sneakers with his and I felt like an idiot. So it does, the appearance thing. It's the character and what the person actually does, and he has both. He can come to work in a sari every day. I wouldn't care. Like it would make no difference.
It's not going to happen.
You've done that. You've never. Right.
It's good to have somebody there that gives you the confidence to know that, hey, we can do this together.
So we got a little bit of Gregory's sort of where I grew up, what the vibe was. Jared, do you mind sharing a little bit about where you grew up? Maybe were there sort of ideological, political, religious elements intertwined? Give us a little bit about your experience. All right, so yes, there was.
United States. I was born in Queens, New York, actually, and then I moved to probably every borough with my mother and my biological father. Throughout the city, every borough except Staten Island. We lived in Brooklyn, we lived in Bronx, in the Thariet. We lived all over the place in New York. And then my parents got divorced, and then my mother remarried, and then my stepfather moved me upstate to Rockland County, which was like moving to was Pinellas. It was like the most racist.
Oh no!
And like it was like we moved in a middle class neighborhood. So when they saw my father there. When I first moved into this neighborhood, the only mixed race couple in the neighborhood, they saw my father fixing the house. They thought he was the help, so they were waving. They were like, "Oh, it's just some guy coming to fix the house." But then when he threw his suit on, and then he went to the bus to go to work, then that's when all my hell started. So my hell included, being called the N-word, having my father's house that he worked so hard on being spray painted on with the N-word, me having to fight as a child. Constantly. Kind of what made me become an artist was staying inside to not get bullied. So I had like an inner world. I would sit and paint and draw. My mother gave me a lot of materials to keep me busy. And so that was like my childhood was super terrifying, compared to a regular kid's. But there were some bright spots in that. It wasn't all doom and gloom because the rest of my family lived in New York City. So I'd be here. Half of my life was spent in the city, and my cousins in Queens. I have a cousin in Brooklyn. I have my biological father lived in Harlem. I actually live 2 blocks away from his block, which is crazy. So I drive past the block that my father lived on, my biological father, for 30-something years. Wow. So I drive by there all the time. So I grew up in like Tale of Two Cities. I guess it's like a Tale of Two Cities type of thing. Mm-hmm. So I'm a country boy and a city boy at the same time. With this, I guess, like who kind of grew up in the South too at the same time, which, I guess, gauging the racism in New York, I guess, it was more poignant than I thought it would be compared to the South, because I lived in the South for 7 years too. It's in the future. But yeah, I grew up in Rockland County. So most of my, I'm going to say junior high school, kindergarten, junior high school, not kindergarten, middle school, and then junior, then high school was spent in that county.
Both of you kind of came to, it sounds like, the New York contemporary art scene in different places, different perspectives. But tell me about that. So you're making art, and I would imagine your mother, other people maybe said, oh, yo, Jared's got some skills. Were there moments like that early on where people said, hey, I like what's going on here. It's not just a pastime. It's not just a safe space, but...
I was always singled out. So I was always singled out as, like, I guess the gifted artist kid. So ceramics was my favorite class. My teacher was Miss Agresta. I always talk about her. She's the first. She was my refuge in the school that was just like, I was terrified to be in. Her class was my favorite class. So I was like her project. She would always spend a lot of time with me. And then when I went to high school, I had Mr. Levine, who was an amazing art teacher, and he saw I had skill, and he would let me stay. He would let me cheat and sometimes like skip a class and stay in his class, and the other class I would do that. And then we had a jewelry making class, and I was in there. Mr. Franchetta, excuse me. Okay. I would be in his class. Or anything creative, yeah, I would do. So I would kind of get drawn into it because I would do it and people would see it and be like, oh, you got, a little something or whatever. So yeah, I didn't really have to push ever. It was just, I would just make things. I've always been a maker and a person who could sit in a room and make something without being bothered by the outside. I've always been like that. Yeah.
And did you feel like art was going to be part of your future? Were you thinking about the future at that moment?
I didn't know if art was going to be a part of it because I kept getting in trouble and putting art to the side. And it would always come back to me. Like it would be something stupid. Somebody would be like, hey, can you draw? And I'd be like, yeah, I could draw. And then, could you draw me a card or whatever? And I would draw. They'd be like, oh my God. And then like the word gets out, now you're an artist, and it's weird. So, even in there, art, they're in prison, there's a artist like hierarchy. If you can make art, you're important and you get passes for everything. Kind of, it's weird. Yeah, like put on a pedestal.
Oh, but, wow. Yeah. Tell me a little bit, and I want to dive into that a little bit more, but this notion of making art and seeing art and then the contemporary art world in New York City. And I know even for me, growing up making art, people going, oh, look, doing tattoos for guys on sports teams with like eyeliner, on the bus on the way to the game, like really ridiculous stuff. But you get to a certain age, and we'll see when that was for the two of you. Gregory, maybe it was coming into Thunderdome here and sort of seeing private galleries and some of these big museums, institutions. But for the two of you, and Jared, we'll start with you here. When did you realize there was like a contemporary art thing going on in the world, but also in New York? When did making art, having that skill set, knowing what it meant to you, having an idea of artists, maybe famous artists, whatever that means, and then sort of taking that step into the full awareness of the art world as we might all kind of collectively know it? Tell me a little bit about that. Start with you, Jared, and then Gregory.
I've always been a gallery hopper since I was like in my 20s. So I was always interested. I've seen Basquiat's hanging in places in the 80s. I've seen a lot of Keith Haring stuff hanging when I was a kid. So I would be in the Village. I'd be, the art world used to be in Tribeca when I was a kid. I think in the 90s. It wasn't really in Chelsea where it is now. And that's when I would go and stomp around there, So when the first sense that I had of this contemporary thing that exists, this behemoth, I guess I always known that it's been there. The first revelation was sitting in my cell looking at the New York Times art section and seeing a painting that went for this absurd amount of money. And it was an artist that I liked, but I was like, I started looking and I said, and then I thought, okay, it goes for this much money, but why? What makes that happen? Like, what are the mechanisms? And then you start to study it and you say, okay, it's about people, it's about timing, it's about the work itself, hopefully, but there's other factors that come into play to make a contemporary art market. It doesn't just exist in this ether. It has to have support. and the things that support it it's a myriad of different systems that uphold this thing, that you don't even see. They're hidden, and there's curators, and there's museums, and it's a whole ecosystem that's underneath it. So the first realization, really, I would say, is when I came back to New York, and I said, okay, this thing is like, super massive in New York, worldwide, of course, but in New York, it's its own ecosystem for sure. So I would say it's always been there. I can't think of one moment, but I've always known that it exists. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think you put that nicely. The myriad of mechanisms, and I think on one hand, people who are intelligent and like information and are curious about how things work, that could be really fascinating. I know for me, the mechanisms can be fascinating, but sometimes the mechanisms pull us away from the essence. And Gregory, perhaps in academia, perhaps in the world of religion, sort of like institutional spheres where you have like the thing, the essence of the thing, right? In religion, it's a sort of connection to a spiritual essence or a higher power, right? In academia, we're educating people and furthering human intellectual evolution, right? And art, people are making really great, beautiful things that hopefully move us and move the world and the species and all these other things. And yet, they're all intensely, oftentimes rank with these mechanisms and things, and so part of what this thing is kind of parsing that out sometimes and making and holding space for the times where those mechanisms are good. Those mechanisms might mean support, right? And sometimes those mechanisms could be sort of problems, and I think what I like about the two of you guys is, you're multifaceted. Right? Like this podcast thing here, we're not just kind of talking to artists, it's not what this is. We're talking to people who are fascinated by the mechanisms, the good, the bad, and continue to transcend that themselves while staying in it and doing that work, So, Greg, I want to throw it right back to you, right? Because you did kind of hint at these so-called mechanisms. But, Gregory, you mentioned this administrative role, and I can sense that you kind of have that sort of ability. It comes with leadership. It comes with intelligence. It also comes with a lot of sensitivity. But, I do think we're at like a cultural moment where some of these mechanisms have sort of reached their
zero point.
Yeah, 0 point, or they're at the end of their shelf life. And there's a lot of like sort of compounding issues that have helped bring these things to the end of something, perhaps the beginning of something else. I think it's a good spot, because we can go all day with art, to just talk about the mechanisms in place at Silver Art and what that looks like for the two of you guys navigating that and crafting an atmosphere where if there are mechanisms, it's the best of the mechanisms. It's the things that can connect us to what art is, what art can do, and maybe that's an interesting thing too. We're at this sort of point where we're asking ourselves, what is art? What is art really doing? Is it just something over the couch, or is it just flippant decoration and ornamentation? Does it have to be this sort of earth-shattering political agent of some kind? But just within the paradigm of Silver Art, tell me a little bit about those day-to-day mechanisms and how the two of you guys sort of navigate that. So what things do you feel like are good mechanisms, and what things would you like to see change internally and externally?
Oh gosh,
that
list is long, but what you were saying about what is art, and you were talking about how these different institutions of common culture or even high culture are things. It did make me think of my dearly departed father. The first time I came home and I had a book by Martin Heidegger. It was actually just a little loose leaf, monograph. And the title of it was, "What is a Thing?" And my dad looked at it, and he knew I was already on my way down the primrose path to destruction. He goes, what is a thing? And this past Friday, I tried it at the beginning of every cohort, and this current cohort at Silver Art moved in May, but I still haven't been able to really have a deep, meaningful conversation with everybody yet. So I'm sort of on the tail end of that. And last Friday, I had coffee with one of our artists, Kamal Patton, who is this absolute genius, multidisciplinary artist, has done installations at the MoMA and the Met, and as a professor at the Art Institute of Chicago. But he defined a thing as a gathering of concerns. Yeah. And I think that's the best definition of thing I have ever heard. It's a gathering of concerns.
Gregory, I want to jump in on you real quick, only to say that, you know, in old sort of like Viking Nordic cultures, there was like the all thing, right? I wonder if the thing, as it was often abbreviated as, is tethered to that notion. Is like you gather at the thing, you gather at the all thing, which was people coming together, congregating to flesh out their grievances or issues in the community, right? It's sort of like a folk moot or something. You know, it's like when the Ents, to stick on the Tolkien reference, the Ent moot, you know, it's sort of like the Nordic or Scandinavian version of a moot or something like that. So when I hear that, a sort of consortium of ideas attached to the thing, I can't help but go way back in that way. Right? Sorry to cut you off.
No, you didn't cut me off at all. I think this is wonderful. And certainly when I was growing up, there were very few artists that a pastor's kid would have, you know, kind of known about until you get into high school and college, and then you have liberal arts courses and you actually learn about the history of modern art and things like that. But you know, I would have known about Jackson Pollock and people like John Cage, but of course the most notable of them is Andy Warhol, and you know, because
a PA guy,
a PA guy himself, and somebody that very much grew up in a very religious household, and that stayed with him until his dying breath. I mean, he was a weekly mass Catholic, even though he's a very naughty boy. Warhol said, in late-stage capitalism, all art has to be business art. Now, I don't know how I feel about that, because as Albert Hubbard once said, art is not a thing, it is a way. And my personal opinion is that this is something that has been lost in the contemporary art world, or is being lost, where art is not just about objects that one purchases and one adds to an asset sheet. It is a way of being and inhabiting the world. And as Lacan said, it's looking awry. It's like, and that's what I would do at these Jeffersonian dinners, is I'd be Wall Street finance, tech bros, you know, finance bros and girls and gals. And then you bring a couple of visual artists in there, and they're always going to have a completely different take on the conversation that's at hand. Yeah. And then all of a sudden people say, oh, I've never thought about it that way before. That's really a big part of what we're up to is at Silver Art, to bring it back to what we partner on, is that art is not a thing, it is a way, even though the objects that are made are certainly a big part of it. And we want artists who want to have that commercial success to get it. But it's often a very isolating thing being an artist. And when you can have a moot, an art moot,
yes,
that's kind of what we've got going.
Yeah. Jared, what are your sort of thoughts on that? This notion of art as a way, not necessarily a thing. Tell us a little bit about that from your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to be an artist, it's definitely the warrior's path, and it's an individual sport for sure. You know, so like you talked about mechanisms earlier. Our main mechanism is love, and our mechanism is we enable people. You know, we try to enable them as much as possible and give them exposure Those are like our main mechanisms there, is networking and the aforementioned, like that. But yeah, art's definitely, I mean, yeah, we're the last of the warriors where whenever an army invades, the first thing they do is go to the museums, steal all the art. They don't go for the weapons, they go to the museums. World War II, they went and snatched everything. So there must be something dangerous about us if they're always looking to snatch our narrative out of the mind's eye. So we are the last vanguard that exists on this earth of what's real and all this other fake stuff you see. I don't want to curse. But.
Yeah. By the way, you're allowed to, just like this is a safe space to criticize academia, a safe space to reference Tolkien. You can go there, Jared. You can drop it if you need to. You know,
I try not to.
No, thank you.
Piss me off. Ask me a question. Piss me off.
No, we're gonna get there too.
Well, I'd love for you to keep going on that in the sense of being in New York City, and I would say there's maybe people who fall more into this sort of Warhol camp of, well, if everything has been turned into a commodity, we might as well just play that game. And what you're really saying is there's a different game to be played, and a true artist is really after something else, and they're really about potentially rewriting the rules of the game, which is something we actively support and encourage here. So do you find that there's a community in New York City and in the world who's trying to find their way more in that direction? How is that going at Silver Art? How's that going in the world for you?
I find in the art world you have artists who think that A, B, C, and D has to happen for them to be successful. They have to have a gallery, they've got to have all these exhibitions, all these things have to happen for them to be an artist. These thoughts have been stuck in their mind from just people who are not in the art world or haven't been in it long enough to know that it's much deeper than that. But you're also going to have people who are very deep in their practice, and they're not commercial. They might not have any commercial success, or might just have just enough to get by. You know, you're going to have a wide spectrum of those artists that are striving to be commercial. Some artists become commercial by accident. You know, some artists can stay with the soul of whatever their project is, whatever their narrative is, and still have commercial success. That's heaven. You know, that's where you want to be, in a place where you could say what you want to say, fuck what anybody says, and basically, of course, monetize it, but still not sell out. That's the dream. You know. Now going back to Warhol's art was all about his narrative was saying something about it. So it wasn't like it was about commercialism. He was talking about. He was showing what it was. You know, he was pointing the finger, and he was one of the first ones to actually do that. You know, probably in the modern time to say, hey, look at this anything. One of those. You know, it was like the toilet from Duchamp, almost like in his. The whole career was that toilet to me. You know what I mean? So I believe that. Yeah, there's a bunch of artists who they want to live the life of an artist, but not be an artist. You have a bunch of those. You know?
I think that's where Ashley was kind of headed. Is when
exactly.
people go, referencing Warhol, the everybody's 15 minutes. Of course, he probably had no idea, and people have made that commentary too. I think, there's one thing that I push harder than anybody is, we must see the trees, through the forest, right? The forest for the trees, see the forest. So avoiding conflation or missing sort of the point, right? If something's pointing the finger, it's not of that, right? Journalistically too, right? This notion that if you're doing an interview, you're interviewing a public figure who's maybe problematic. That doesn't mean you're complicit simply by platforming them or something. There's value in having a discussion with somebody, right? So we need to be able to see through the forest, right? To connect with the trees, right? But I do think sometimes where I've become a little bit upset is when art especially seems to be more in service, not just the selling of the art object itself, but the art is in service of selling another tertiary object, right? So if we're only here to support the selling of disposable fashion items, or if things seem sort of dubious, if the narrative's off, that's where I believe there's realm for criticism, where there's an opportunity to step and say, you might think you're doing Warhol, you might think you're pointing the finger, but you might actually be a lot closer to the thing you think you're pointing to as opposed to the finger itself. So can we still sort of hold space? Is there a space for us to kind of break that down and work that out? You know, that's where I think the criticism sort of is. And even I think that criticism has sort of reached an end point too. Well, people got to make a living at a time where it seems like that's never been more difficult in the 21st century. We're sort of arriving at this point. And I think, again, we could break down what art is. I do sort of more than ever, I think, lean on the point of, is there joy in the art of creation? Do you believe in it? Do you like it? Are you legitimately hurting anyone? Is this alienating anyone? Is that, you know, depending on who you're attempting to alienate, I would rather say constructively criticize, hopefully, in this moment, because funding for things has never been more challenging. We've discussed this a lot already on this podcast with some other guests, where maybe this funding channel was robust and it's maybe shrinking or shifting or diverting somewhere else or disappearing entirely. So you mentioned this new cohort that came in May, and I am personally curious to check out the cohort
Please
in more
come.
depth.
Yeah. May I just pause here and say, I think my favorite moment in the last cohort was when Kurt came and did studio visits. I mean, you are a brilliant conversation partner for an artist, and I just want to say thank you, because so many artists felt seen that day, whereas so many of the conversations that artists routinely have are just about that end product. So I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I just wanted to...
I'm not good with compliments. I might cry. Like,
Please do.
That means so much to me. Not just you saying that, but the thing you're pointing to means so much to me. And this is also why I don't think anybody fights harder than me to maintain the right to speak to anybody, to maybe push through those walls that have been built up for sometimes real reasons. You know, you're growing up upstate and people are just fucking terrible to you. Yeah. You know, we start to sort of build these shells around ourselves and these walls between us and our neighbors. And a lot of growing up is building new walls and tearing others down and trying to like work that out. And I just will fight to my death to say, we might disagree. We might have wildly different experiences in the past, present, likely the future, but I will reserve the right to talk to you. And by the way, like sometimes, no, thank you right now. You know, I'm all right. And there was a lot of growing up for me over the last few years in terms of knowing when the time is right. I was thinking, I'm going to go real quick with this, but when I was young, like between the ages of like 3rd grade and 10th grade, I was really kind of chubby. I just stopped growing vertically. I started growing, horizontally. And Ashley and I joke about the nutrition awareness wasn't so great in like the 90s, you know. But anyway, you know, my dad was like a great athlete and wanted me to be a really good athlete and all these things. And they knew I was creative and artistic and stuff. But the point of this is like, I think he saw like a future ideal. And it was like, hey, you right now who's storing up acorns as chubbiness to grow some insane growth spurt in some inevitable future point. But being in that point where he sees his son, who he wants to step into some sort of bodily ideal or perhaps even quote unquote masculine ideal, he didn't have a lot of patience. You know, he wanted to see it then and there. And it was like, in time, my good man, you know, and I didn't have the awareness of this. And I had to check myself a little bit, really going into like deeper into some of the COVID years where I was like, shit, looking at the art world, looking at the world. and wanting to see the ideal, like wanting to see the big universal objective ideal and being like, I want it now.
Yes.
And understanding, and certainly as COVID's unfurling, as George Floyd, Breonna, and this massive sort of movement, what's sort of was happening politically is we had to go through all those growing pains. One cannot point and go, get there. It's got to go through it, you know? So I just, even though I maintain the right to engage with anybody, I did learn that there are rules of engagement. There is self-awareness, knowing when and where to insert yourself, right, or center oneself. And also sometimes going, yo, you got to give it a little time. You got to let it go from this to this. Be a little patient. Don't do that thing that you still gripe about that your dad did where he's like, hurry, you know, come on. It's like, you got to give it a little time. So that means a lot to me, saying that I do believe is my thing. I do think that sometimes arts journalism or criticism doesn't serve that as much as I would like it to.
Yes.
There's other mechanisms in play now across all these sort of dimensions and vectors, from financial to political to this or that does get in the way, you know, but you saying that means a lot to me. And I want to throw it back real quick just to say, because, you know, Ashley and I have been thinking about this here, is that, you know, that took a lot of time for you to bring us through and walk us around, and all the artists being present, to be present for me in that moment, to be present for the program in that moment. And we were thinking, like, you know, everybody took their time to provide this really great experience for us. And I still feel super privileged to step into somebody's studio space or move through a program like that. But there's also time and there's some work there. So maybe not right now, but what it means to help support, let's say, silver art, and maybe even look into making sure that's worth everyone's while too. Like how special that was for me. Like maybe there's like a calendar year round initiative that can be put in place to make sure that that experience, I'm not saying it has to come with a price, but I would only say the value for me there, as I'm sure there was probably value on the other side, as you're saying, there might be something there in terms of a program that has its big end of the year gala, and I'm sure there's other sort of funding nodes, but just from our end, speaking to that walkthrough, that is something that I think I would even be interested, if I do see this new cohort, to be like, maybe there's a channel to have someone like myself even sort of contribute something financially to take that time, you know? So we can talk about that maybe later on this or down the road, but I would only say, like, the value there to me and the access I'm afforded, I would love to open up that access to others, but also supplement the program in terms of your time, the time of those artists doing that. So there's something there too, and that's kind of what this program is about. Ashley, I'm talking a lot. Gregory set me off. I get emotional when I get compliments. I don't get them all the time, you know? I don't get them all the time.
You deserve it. You deserve it.
Thank you. But the program itself, perhaps.
Started in it was conceived of in 2019, and
2019,
the first cohort
program, and then you
happened during COVID.
All right, so
it was a little bit of a slow half start.
All right, well, maybe for the last 2 years, and Jared, please feel free to jump in there, just sort of concerned from a funding perspective. What have you seen shift or change, and what would you like to see shift or change as far as funding goes?
Maybe the best place to start, Jared, would be to talk about the example par excellence of Aggie and Art for Justice, and maybe you can tell that story, and that would be a good launching point for us to have this conversation.
Yeah, so he starts with Mount Olympus. So the reason I say that is everybody in art world knows who Agnes Kund is, I'm pretty sure. And if they don't, I'll tell you right now, she's given more to the arts than probably any living human being. And I don't mean, I mean at an individual level and in a collective level, both models. So, you know, she sold a painting, you know, the whole story, 165 million. And then she used that money to start Art for Justice. And if you look at the alumni at Art for Justice and what they've done, it'll take you 2 days to go through everybody, all the things they funded, all the initiatives, all the work that they've done. And it's good to use Aggie as a starting point, because she should be the principal example of what the next generation of philanthropy looks like. This is what they should aspire to be right now. We have a lot of the individuals from her time period that are going away are no longer funding things. So now it's up to the youth. And these kids need, and when I say kids, I'm talking about grown kids, 30s, 40s, that have money. They need to be mentored. You know, they need to know, hey, it's cool you got a Thomas Kincaid and you're over here. You know what I mean? It's all good, but
Thomas Kincaid.
It's all right. Hey, it's cool, but there's
Are those the paintings of light?
Yeah, he was the painter of light.
Yeah,
He's a fellow
He-
Long Island bro like me, I
He
think.
trademarked painter of light.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
And no kick against his stuff. I actually, it's a different thing.
He was a
remember-
master. He was a master.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little his applique. You know, there's some texture.
But the kids need to know. They need to know the difference between, contemporary existing art and art world and not.
Yeah.
What's been in the past.
Yeah.
And they don't what's happening now is, it's going to happen with the galleries too. A lot of these galleries are going to not exist anymore because they're not going after these young kids with money. And these young kids with money like, oh, what do I go do with it? You know, they'll buy posters and put them into their walls into their 50s and 60s if you allow them. And now,
That same Pulp Fiction poster.
yeah. Like, I mean, the Led Zeppelin poster's cool until you're like 18, you know, or whatever. I mean, but then it's like, you got to step your game up. When you step your game up, what they need to understand is that a whole world opens up to you in philanthropy of people who are like a feel-good world. And this needs to be conveyed to them so they'll want to participate in it.
Yeah.
Because right now, you see things are not getting funded because, especially from the government, because the government is now turning into a complete police state. This is what's going to happen. There's no way to get around it. The government is not going to fund anything to deal with creativity because they see that as an enemy, and they see creativity as kind of, in Star Wars, what creativity would be like the last Jedi. Like that's the thing they want to kill the most, because with creativity becomes freedom.
Yeah.
And, you know, they'd rather police us to death and spend money on policing us to death than spend the money on creativity, because that usurps the possibility of them having power in the future.
Yeah.
You know, artists will show who you are, and we will show what reality is.
Yeah.
And this is why arts are attacked first, because we kind of, we can say things and get away with things that maybe like a journalist like yourself can't, you know, because you've got an editor. We have no editors.
Yeah.
Nobody could edit anything that I do. They can't. There's no interjection of anybody where I say, hey, is this cool to go show on the wall?
Yeah.
That doesn't exist for us, and that's dangerous.
Yeah.
You know, because you know the press is controlled, and you know that you know editors are.
Yeah.
You know, they're working. They're double agents to me. All of them. They're saying, oh, we can't print this, we can't print that. But now they're learning. Now that there's a sea change in sentiment that's going on right now, and when you put these fake things in, people get upset, and now they're saying, oh, this is like obviously plastic, and now you're losing credibility, you know, and then it creates a crisis of credibility in journalism, and you know, in art also, you can't really, you can have this crisis of credibility only if other genres come and intercede. But when you see an image and it's been done by one person and hasn't been edited, it's coming straight out of their mind. That's the most powerful thing on the planet Earth, and they want to control that narrative.
Agreed. Yeah. First of all, that was rock and roll. Thank you for that. And that's real. You know, people, I've said this before, like people ask me, and I'll answer a different way, even in this little anecdote here, is people will go, you know, Kurt, I heard you're a writer. Who do you write for? And
everyone.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, but more than ever, I just want to be like, sometimes Penske, sometimes Condé Nast, sometimes whoever the hell owns New York Times or Bezos.
That's it.
And, you know, I think we've really seen, you know, especially as these big companies consolidate and gobble up more things. I mean, like, you know, I'm not completely throwing these people who help keep these publications alive, right? Because it's not all bad. Like I believe in journalism when it's done right. I believe in art criticism when it's done right, which means constructively and keeping that open mind and keeping the conversation flowing, keeping ideas open, right? Actively rejecting bad ideas and backing it up with real reporting and real journalism. But I do think that that's kind of what we're talking about. And I know for me, it was like, I don't really feel like I'm writing for insert publication head. I feel like I'm writing for whoever the parent company is and what their sort of stock interests are, and they don't want to rock the boat. They just want to do what's safe. And at some point, you go, is this serving me as a brain, as a soul? Is this serving me as a creative person? You know, like I looked at a lot of the writing as a creative act, right? And where does that line up with journalism? You know, should I go get my poetry on over here, or can I work that in over here? Can I do something more novelistic, or do I like one publication? I was doing a big cover story, and they couldn't have been more concerned. They couldn't have been less concerned about really the thing itself, but whether or not I used a nut graph. Do you know what a nut graph is? It's not even worth knowing, but I'm going to tell you. Please elucidate. All right. Do you know what a nut graph is? A nut graph is a cheesy little sort of journalistic term that's emerged over the last couple of years. I don't know how long it's been around, but what a nut graph is you're pretty much obligated now to begin your feature profile on a subject with a nut graph. And what that is, it's like just one sassy little like tagline or sort of log line at the beginning of your piece that sort of frames the entire piece.
Right.
But the tone of it has to be a certain way. And it could have nothing to do with the tone you're attempting to establish with the piece. So anyway, this is like one gig I had, and I was very happy to have it. And for the most part, people were cool. But when I tell you, it was like Kubrick. It was like Dr. Strangelove. This nut graph.
Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room.
It was like nut graph, nut. I was like, this is cultish, this nut graph situation. So anyway, I'm getting off topic here. But the point is like, I think we're at a time, and maybe you feel this, maybe you see this with the new cohort, Jared, maybe you feel even like re-energized in this capacity perhaps, but I do feel amidst a lot of the like, and the malaise or the despair or the cynicism or whatever the hell, I'm kind of tired of a lot of that, a lot of real grievances, Gregory, right? Like we sort of understand like there's a lot of things to be concerned about, to protest about, to stand up against, etc. So tell me a little bit about that search for authenticity in this moment, that sovereignty, that freedom at the program and also at the sort of artist level.
Yeah, I think that the artists that we have there, there's some that behave like you're describing. Like it's already baked into their practice to, you know, say fuck you to power. Some of them are on the edge of it, but not really saying it. And maybe that practice isn't about it, but it's still a great practice what they're doing. It might not be that they're all in attack mode, you know. My practice is it has to be that, because I just can't sit back and not say anything about what's going on. I feel like I'd be wasting my platform, you know. And I think that these artists have platforms also in different genres. Some of them are on the same page that I am, criticizing the system, carceral state specifically, and others. I feel like they're, you know, the pinnacle of talking about what goes on in society is definitely the carceral state. But I think that there's like these little sub things, you know, categories that other people are addressing. So it adds to the whole. So they might be talking about the big, but the micro things that they're talking about will equal up to the macro in the end. Into the big cosmos
right.
in the end. You know what I mean?
Right.
I would, that's 100% spot on. And I just would add to that I think that there is a sense right now where there's a crisis of the difference between sincerity and authenticity in contemporary visual art. I think many artists are sincere in what they're doing, but that doesn't mean that they're authentic. And I've spoken to so many artists that gave up what their original center of purpose was for becoming an artist to get attenuated by advice that they have gotten from the journalists, the writers, the dealers, the collectors. And they start moving in a different direction, which may is a feature of late stage capitalism, because we do want people to succeed. We don't want starving artists. And yet to go to that place of authenticity often puts you beyond the pale of what people are comfortable with. That's why there's a difference between going to a place like, hopefully, Silver Art, where the act of creation is happening before you, and going to something like an art fair like Frieze, where, frankly, a lot of it feels... I used to go to Frieze in the Armory show with Walter Robinson, who recently passed earlier this year. An amazing artist, was one of the founding figures of the Times Square Art Show, but also was the original editor for, I believe, ArtNet News, and a great critic as well. And we were at the Armory fair, and he's like, so much of this feels like product design and not contemporary visual art. And then I went a couple of months ago to the opening. Jared and I went to the opening of the Jack Whitten show at the MoMA. And here's an example of real authenticity. But what people don't, people, I think, assume that if you get a retrospective at the MoMA, it means you were a super successful artist. Jack Whitten spent much of his career totally at odds with the contemporary art market. People befuddled by what he was doing, not understanding why every couple of years he would, he was doing the squeegee paintings, and then he would do other kinds of work. Now it makes sense, and his legacy is with Hauser and Wirth. But that wasn't happening while he was alive. And so I think that that really is the most difficult thing for an artist to confront, because there is a responsibility of the artist too, because society needs artists to lead and not to follow where the market is going. And it's a very, very difficult balance to have, and it's unenviable, but we are where we are. And so hopefully what we're able to do, and I hope it will grow, is to keep saying to artists, there are some people out there in the, what does Bernie Sanders say? The millionaires and the billionaires. There are still people out there who really do care to see the creative spirit flourish and survive. I am not one of those people that is just constantly complaining about people aren't generous enough. I think when people are inspired by something, they go deep and they make extravagant gestures, like selling a beloved Roy Lichtenstein painting for $165 million or whatever, and then giving it all away. I think that's still possible. I think people just need models, and there has to be this coming together of this great. There's trillions of dollars in the economy that are about ready to pass from one generation to the next, but everyone is starved for meaning. And politics has proven very unsatisfactory on both sides. Everybody's dissatisfied. This week's news cycle is just a reminder of that. The religious world has failed spectacularly at providing meaning. So there have to be certain places and certain people that provide that sort of spiritual uplift and inspiration, so that we can not be nihilists, which is where we are because of the algorithm and our social media platforms, and everything is
doom scrolling.
It has to hit you like that, or you forget about it forever.
And this emphasis, this notion of followers, when maybe we really need leaders, not so much influencers, but leaders. Jared said earlier, enablers, and I'm often calling people enablers in not a good way, enablers in the pejorative. But I like, Jared, when you said enablers, artists especially can be enablers. What are some of the things in a positive sense that artists are enabling? And what about you specifically? What do you feel you're enabling out there with people who come into contact with you as a person too, and your work?
So a greater understanding of how humanity is treated once it's been extricated from society. A greater understanding of that is what I'm thinking about at all times. Because I tell people also, I'm the canary in the coal mine. So like before COVID came, I was, they use behavioral scientists in prisons to study exactly how, when they implement new policies, not laws, what the reaction will be. So when COVID came, I was home filing my nails because I had seen this before. It's just, I want people to realize that this is just a big, low security prison. You think you're free, and you are to a certain extent, but you're really, there's a lot of the carceral state out here. And there's a lot more of it out here. So that's what I'm trying to convey. That's what I want to enable people to realize, is that you do not live where you think you live. And right now you're seeing it when you could just go to the grocery store. Somebody like me, they might snatch me and say, "Hey, you're not from this country." You know what I mean? No matter what I say, they could disappear me tomorrow. I have friends that are like, I have one friend, he's African American, his wife's Mexican. She was born here, but she's Mexican. The whole family's in Mexico. But I told him, you got to get tinted windows, bro. Because you could get pulled over and they snatch your wife. And he's an ex-police officer. I told him they don't care. So, like my whole thing is to wake people up and make them, and enable them to realize that they're giving too much power away. They're giving. They don't realize they don't have any agency within themselves. They realize that they do have agency to pick and choose what happens with them in their future. But instead, people are lazy, and they want to give power over their physical selves to somebody else.
What do you think are the elements of reclaiming agency in that scenario? So people get woken up, and then what else do you think happens after that?
After they do it, then you have to live it in everything you do. Once you realize you have agency, you actually go out and you live you exercise.
That's the
exercise
way
your agency. Yeah,
that you're sort of discussing the artist way, and not just this is how I go about my day. The way is
art is
living
war.
it.
Art is war.
Yeah.
It's not about pretty pictures for me. It's not. I mean, some of them look pretty, but this is like war. For me, it is. Like it's. I'm not playing when it comes to making these images. I'm super serious about it. There's pretty, there's beauty, but I don't want to, imagine if Picasso played it safe and just did portraits, and he never did Guernica. So if for me, there has to be a point where what's happening out here creeps into your practice. I see artists that do landscapes. I'm like, how the fuck do you do that? Like, at least put a mushroom cloud in that motherfucker. You know what I'm saying? Like something like, you know what I mean? Like, could you do something like a couple of, some drones or some shit? You know what I mean?
Get some drones in there.
Go do some plein air painting in Ukraine. And then paint what you actually see.
I asked Shepard Fairey years ago. A lot of people are, he's not really an artist. He's a design guy or stuff like that. And I understand that, right? Like, I also think we're at a point where, when I say art critics and I say Jerry, you probably know which guy I'm talking about. I said, hey, he was liked a painting that it looked like it was made in a factory to appeal to like high-end fine art, contemporary art sensibilities in a way that was so like homogenous that it felt lacking. It succeeded. And I said, hey, don't you think this is just kind of doing it? He said, you're kind of a dick, And I was like, all right, we can't have that discussion, that to some degree you're here to uphold what art is. And the insertion of that mushroom cloud or those drones, suddenly you're over here. Like, I was interviewing Shep for Interview Mag way back in the day, and at the end of it, Obama was, I said, if something else besides hope would be on the poster, what would be on? He said drones, and so. Like I said, there's criticism along the sort of political spectrum, but Gregory, let me ask you though, and you can't go into like the whole cohort right now. And by the way, we moved a little quickly away from Agnes and some of the initiatives that came out. We'll get back to that because there's so much fascinating stuff going on there. But without maybe shouting out some artists if you feel comfortable in the new cohort, or even what you're seeing with maybe some artists who might still be there, where do you see them pushing the envelope in a sense where it's like, hey, listen, like there is a language, right? In contemporary art, we kind of like understand certain things, right? By the way, there was an article that came out today in the BBC about Van Gogh's Sunflowers and how there's something subversive in there, something deep in there, right? Like something maybe beyond just a still life, right? But, is it overt political commentary that's rippling through the ages? Not so much. It's about an appeal to something else, right? But let me push you there, Gregory, first, or just ask, do you see certain artists, perhaps not even necessarily formerly incarcerated artists in the program, but possibly that too? And
we should just say that we do have 4 studios that are set aside in each cohort for justice impacted artists, and Jared is the leader of that program. Sorry.
No, please. Thank you for that. Yeah. Thank you for that distinction. Jared, was that always the case? I know you've been a senior fellow, but some of the sort of, let's say, specificity of artists working. Artists for Justice, is this the term? Or
no, it's Art for Justice.
Art for Justice.
Well, Justice Impacted is the Justice Impacted.
Yeah, we don't say mass incarceration anymore. Or what was the other one?
Formerly incarcerated. We don't use that.
So I was told.
This is like unhoused.
I was told in a hallway by people in power. There was a couple of lawyers there.
Well, what do you think about that?
That's cool. I like it because
it's okay
when
for
you say
things
mass
to evolve.
Incarceration, it scares people. They say, "Oh my God, the word mass."
Or formerly incarcerated, even that's a bit much.
Yeah, no. For me, I don't care. I mean, justice impacted. It doesn't bother me because it's whatever. It's just labels. But they're saying it, I guess, to use as a terminology for people to come into knowing about it more gradually. Instead of saying mass incarceration.
Formerly incarcerated. By the way,
justice impacted.
Yeah, well, also, I think you're close with some people at the Innocence Project, and that's could be a whole other thing. We could go there, but as we know, people who were formerly incarcerated were often incarcerated for things that are no longer illegal. Maybe they were completely innocent and they didn't have the tools or the technology or a paradigm that could lead to their innocence. So I think just like we're seeing more sensitivity with, let's say, the unhoused or the temporarily unhoused, or
it's othering. So it's what you're talking about, othering. So we make sure that othering doesn't happen at an artistic. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, please.
At an artistic level. Because it's easy for, like you said, to housing, jobs, all the things that come to your mind first. But for an artist, to have to be othered from the art world is like, we can't allow that. That's unacceptable. So I think that they saw that in the beginning, and they asked me to stay on as somebody who's liaises and actually picks who's going to come in and be part of the Justice Impacted program. So it's not just because you were in prison and you made art. It's because you have actual practice and you're trying to say. Most of the artists that we have that are Justice Impacted are saying something about what's going on. So they're like our built-in political component, I want to call it, like kind of a little bit. So if the rest of the artists want to paint flowers and landscapes and goldfish, then it's cool because we still have this relevance that's in there.
Yeah.
But they're not like Hunt Sloanum painting bunnies for the rest of their life. Hopefully, all of them are doing more than that.
Those bunnies got to have an edge.
But I want to come back to your question about some of the artists, and as the director, I don't want to single anyone out, but I will give this year. So there is a blue ribbon jury / committee that makes the final selections for who actually gets in, and every year it's surprising sort of like where that tributary goes and how it finds its way. In this year there's quite a few artists from the South Asian diaspora, and that is creating a very interesting dynamic, and I'll give 2 examples just from side-by-side studios. We have an artist named Aiza Ahmed, who recently graduated from RISD, and she's got some momentum going. But at the base of her current work are these very delightful and very tender renderings of the border officers and soldiers on the India and Pakistan border.
They do the big peacocking kicks and
Correct.
roostering.
Correct.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yes. So her work is about this imaginary line that was drawn by the British decades ago. And now you've juxtaposed people who are in two different countries and sort of arbitrarily setting up an adversarial relationship.
Yeah.
And this peacocking and roostering, which is a brilliant way of putting it, happens every day at sunset, where they're acting very aggressively towards each other. It's détente, but the wrestling term that I've used before in previous writings is kayfabe. It looks real, but it's choreographed, and at the end of the day, in professional wrestling, the goal is not for anybody to get hurt. Sometimes it happens by accident, but the goal is that you get through the match and everybody can work again the next night. So with the India and Pakistan relationship, and as you know, this spring, there's been
feisty for a bit.
Yeah, it got feisty for a little bit there. What Aiza is doing is she's treating these figures in a very, very playful way, and she's giving a nod to the fact that, and she's done tons of research on this, that after they're done with these maneuvers, these war games at the end of the day, they sit down, they have tea across the, literally across the borderline. They're handing presents to one another for various different holidays, and they're actually friends. And I think that's the kind of thing that, an artist can do to sort of thread the needle to bring somebody in and get them to think about a much larger thing. In the studio next to her, Anushka Merchandani, who is an amazing painter. Her work is also about the women ancestors who were living in Pakistan and were forced to move to the newly, drawn up state of India, and how they lost their homes and they were displaced. And I had one of our board members, who's also a major collector, come in, and she was narrating the experience of her grandmother. And this collector, she was, showing the work on the iPad because she's just starting, to paint in this studio. And the collector, Gina Love, went, she had that moment where it just really struck her, both the image and the story behind it. And then a third example from South Asian diaspora, Spandita Malik is a photographer who works with women who are the victims of sexual discrimination and violence in India. And there is a nonprofit that she works with in India that teaches them how to embroider and start their own businesses and make fabrics. And she works on the embroideries with the women, photographs them, and then juxtaposes the embroidery and the textiles with the photos and stories of the women. In each of those circumstances, it's not so on the nose that it's going to make somebody go, oh, I don't agree with that. It's sort of, I describe great art as like having a 10-pound fish on a 5-pound test line. Could snap at any moment. But the goal is to try to and this is where it gets back to money and supporting the arts, reel in people to where now you're in their heart and they want to support. So it goes both ways. We have a responsibility too. You can't just say, well, you have lots of resources, just give us money. We have an obligation to say we're doing something different here.
And again, just mentioned being there for 2 years now, but been in New York for a little bit, and I recall artists being in those buildings on the heels of 9/11, some of those new structures, for a while. And a lot of the artists early maybe were doing kind of like street art sort of murals or doing paintings that were kind of about the view out of those windows, looking out or speaking to what happened on 9/11 and things like that. But I think it's really fair to say that the cohorts have been getting better and better, and that's no sort of disrespect to the artists who've been in the space previously, but more robust, the practice more fleshed out, the sort of levels, layers in terms of what's going into the work itself. And really over the last 2 years, it seems like it's made some astronomical leap, which probably has a lot to do with the two of you guys. But I want to talk a little bit, because we mentioned Agnes, who it seems has kind of, in a very graceful way, as Agnes just sort of does, said, I might be kind of formally done in a way, and not really, but she did sort of speak openly to taking some degree of a step out of the philanthropy zone, if I'm not mistaken. She sort of formally said, hey guys, I think I might take a little break recently. Is that fair?
So she sold another Liechtenstein. So she's also did an A4J now, but for like women's like reproductive health, I believe is what she's focusing on right now. So she's still in the game. But as far as the art, as far as A4J,
just moving the spotlight over a little bit.
But she'll always be doing something philanthropic. I mean, even if it's giving somebody $5,000 to do whatever. Like she's very hands-on. No doubt. I mean, like we were saying before, we need more. We need like 30 more of her.
No doubt.
And the universe only gives us one. Like they only give us one Michael Jackson. They only give us one Jimi Hendrix. So you got to do your best when.
She's special. She's a special person.
When you get a person like that, you just got to thank God that you got them for the little time that you do. And for her to support us has been amazing.
Yes. I want to just because this is going to open up a couple doors in terms of conversation, is Jesse Crimes. You count as a friend and sort of part of that program too, but has recently really kind of come out in terms of, I think, a big installation at the Met. Is there one at MoMA too? Or was there one at MoMA too? So just the Met, right?
He's in the permanent collection of the Met, and it just came down yesterday. It just came down, and I wanted to go see it for the last time, but the piece you're talking about is Apocalyptine, and the other one is Purgatory.
Okay.
So one of them, I helped him sneak out, which is the big one, Apocalyptine, from federal prison, where I met him. And he was already a conceptual artist when I met him. And then, he applied for Silver Art Projects, and he had a studio there too. And last year?
Two cycles
ago, excuse me. It was 2 cycles ago. Wow, time goes by. But he was there, and he has the Center for Art and Advocacy, the Right of Return. So he came home, and he's doing everything he said he was going to do. Nonprofit. I mean, the Met came out of nowhere. It's kind of crazy, to be in the permanent collection and to be one of the only to be a living artist in the Met is incredible. But then to be in the permanent collection is. It's even more incredible. So, but the Met is changing now too. Also, they're more. They're like the hippest new car dealer.
Well, they're building a contemporary wing.
They have Cecily was in there recently. But as much as you can say, this idea of helping him sneak this work out. Can you give us a little play-by-play, a little run? What's that like? So give us a little Jesse backstory. There's probably a lot of overlap too in terms of what it means to make art when you're in prison, if I can say that. Like so there's a lot of overlap there, like what that process is like, but also what sounds to me like a very cinematic moment of actually sneaking this work out. That sounds pretty interesting to me too.
Yeah, so it was like, so we had art programs in the feds where we were at, and basically I was the Morgan Freeman of the art world in Shawshank Redemption. I was that guy. I just knew how to make things happen inside the prison because I was there for so long. So I knew how to get materials. So I was the guy who helped them get the materials, and it just so happened that I ran all the art programs in the prison where we were. And you had to send your package out. It was only me and one other guy that could see your stuff get packed out. And then the guard would look in it, make sure there was nothing in it. We never sent there was no contraband to send. What are you going to send there's nothing of value in prison to send
Right.
home. So
Right.
he sent these sheets, and the piece is gigantic, but a bed sheet basically fits like this. So he folded them, and they would fit in a really thin box. And sometimes he displays it with the box. So there you could see that it has the stamps on it. You can see the dates when we sent it home. So there's 39 panels. It took him 3 years to finish them.
Wow.
So I mean, I was there for the first 26 panels, I want to say, because he came home like 9 months before me, and then the sky was the easiest thing. When I left, he was
Right.
doing the sky,
Right.
because there wasn't a lot to do there.
Yeah.
But yeah, to see what he did, going back to your original question, was
Well,
about him.
I was just saying, like, Agnes has been very supportive, but
Yes.
but him being able to actually sort of set up some sort of, I don't want to say institutions necessarily, but
He
say,
does
Oh,
have-
yeah, he
set
did,
up an
yes.
institution.
but
He's the master of it.
it's been really impressive. But I know you two were also, I'm sure, really helpful. There was that, to speak to good journalism. There was a New York
So,
Times
yeah.
piece recently that
That's
did a
what we
nice
do.
job speaking to
Yeah.
that. Jared, you were
Yeah.
spoken to in the program.
Yeah.
Silver Art was spoken to, and so there's some kind of overlap, collaboration. Obviously, Jesse probably was able to sort of get a footing at Silver Art so that he can help launch out and be out there a little
I
bit
mean,
more.
I'd like to think that Silver Arts helps in that regard, all the artists, because of the exposure, back to exposure you were talking about before. But yeah, Jesse, he was supported by Aggie, like directly, and directly she supported him to start the Center for Art and Advocacy. So it's these relationships are formed through networking. He came home and just hit the ground running, and he had this vision to create a nonprofit, and then he did all the steps. I mean, it took him 10 years to do it, to get to where he is now, and to get funded in the beginning. He was getting funded like 30,000-40,000, and it was in the beginning he was just going out and writing grants and just doing like everybody else does. There was no magic to it. It's just that it was good timing that A for J came about at the same exact time that he was home and I was home, and we were just like, we were shoo-ins for it, because we were the exact people that Aggie wanted to send out into the world. Without A for J, I wouldn't be here sitting next to Gregory talking to you, and it opened up a whole nother world for me, and it did for Jesse. And I mean, Silver Art Projects opens up every universe. It's basically everyone comes to us. We don't have to go look for anybody anymore.
Well, and that is the generosity of the Silverstein family to say, the World Trade Center is 95% leased, and to take an entire floor off of the market and to say, we're going to give this space for artists to flourish. I mean, that's a significant commitment. But they stepped up and they did it. And actually, I think there was a conversation between Agnes and Larry about, okay, you're doing this program for artists. Can we also have justice impacted, artists be in residence there? Because something that we've kind of glided along the edges of, but it is the community of this couple of dozen artists being in community for a year that does create something that is unique in an open studio format where they're learning from each other techniques, they're sharing networks. It really is a really salutary homage to a socialist framework, because it really is something about all for one and one for all. And as W.H. Auden once said, we are here to help others. What the others are here for, I have no idea.
Yeah. I think there's that too. It's okay to kind of focus in a way now, because there is a lot of noise, and maybe going to be more noise. Doesn't mean totally tune out completely, right? Because there's that responsibility there. But I think it's okay to kind of look at what you have at your disposal as an individual, and certainly as an artist, and kind of really lean in, and this moment of really, you talked about being younger and making art and coming against, experiencing some racism and some stuff, and how art was a refuge for you. But can you talk to us about how you started making art in prison, and was that a refuge for you there too? I would imagine it is. And how do you navigate these conversations now with folks coming out and maybe entering into the program? Do you try to connect at a sort of a deep space? And how do you navigate like some of that sort of the trauma of it that's difficult, where some people maybe want to put some of that in the past, and yet they're potentially in a paradigm where to some degree they must acknowledge that experience?
Yeah, you don't want to get pigeonholed into being a justice impacted artist, because that's like othering from the village again, So for me, making art inside was basically about breaking the law as much as I can, as inside prison, artistic laws, which for me meant grabbing as many materials that we weren't supposed to have as much as I could.
Tell us about some of the materials, because Jesse, like hair gel, I think was like a big thing, and all this kind of other stuff. Like, tell us about, for you, Jared, some of the materials.
So for me, I really wanted oil paint, and I wanted like toxic acrylic paints, like that had cadmiums and things you could poison people with. We couldn't get them, so I learned how to like do the paperwork, so that every once in a while I can get some of those snuck in. And it was, for me, I just wanted some orange. I wanted that color. So making work inside is, you have to do it in spurts. You could do long projects, but there's so many lockdowns and there's so much craziness going on that you have to, it's different than when you're out here. Out here, it's so weird to say that I ran all the art programs where I was, and I don't run anything at Silver Arts. I like to think that we all run it together, but I'm in the same, everybody has like their own like cubicles, and everybody's making work in the open, which is like not new to me, but it's new to a lot of artists that, they're used to having their own little closed space, like a room like this. But for me, I'm used to having, big 300-pound guys come over and be like, "Yo, what are you doing?" and have to explain it to me like they're.
Are they critiquing you too?
Oh my God, yeah. Like they're like, "What is this shit?" Like you do an abstract, they're like, "You're not gonna do anything with this when you go home." And then the guy sitting next to me doing like a perfect portrait, that's like, "Oh, he's gonna make all the money," So I dealt with all of the craziness in there. Right. But I mean, it does not matter where I am. I'm always gonna make things. I don't, it doesn't. Because I'm out here, it actually makes it more difficult because I have access to everything. In there, when you don't have access to things, you'd be surprised how inventive you become. I try not to lose my inventiveness while I'm out here. It's very easy to become complacent in your practice and just be like, "Oh, I need some oil paint, go get it," instead of just like scraping it off of somewhere and getting like messing something up on purpose. So.
Yeah, we could talk all day, but I think one thing that's great about your work, especially, is you leave a lot of room. Commentary's there. You can feel it in some of the imagery that's on display, but I like that you leave a lot of room where even here, it's like when you have an artist like you who's making the work you're making, go check out this work. And you're kind of filling in the sort of narrative gaps in a way that still leaves a lot of space, a lot of beauty, while still being hardcore, So, but I kind of want to throw it back to you. I want to go back a little bit, because when we were in the building in Silver Art and sort of taking the tour, you can kind of go in the rounds, and you can do a full 60. And I thought of the way like a doctor or residents, are doing their rounds, But I also think even in prison, right, people have their sort of like religious practice too, if not necessarily an art practice, or, trying to reconnect with the notion of, the name of this platform here is called Good Standing. And on some previous episodes, I've talked about the complexity of the language. On one hand, we're super serious about the importance of being in some degree of good standing, but then also being really kind of punk rock or pushing back, right? To be in good standing with yourself. But what does it mean to be in good standing with a government or an administration that you vehemently disagree with, right? Like, what is it? What is civil disobedience, right? Can you still be in a sense of personal good standing and good standing with your community while pushing back against power structures, et cetera, right? But I'm thinking about your history, the theology, and even growing up in the church and all these things, and probably your own pushing back, like there's not just crisis of faith, but crisis of, the institutions generally, and wanting to push back against these things. But I've watched you move through that space, and I think I've commented on this before, but it's worth sharing here, is that sort of skill set, if I can put it a lot of different ways, the sensitivity, but really this skill set you have and this knowledge base. Do you feel, and Jared, you can chime in here too, please, that to be able to hold space, as people say, with your background in, let's say, comparative religion, theology, but what it means to be not exactly a person of the cloth or a member of the clergy, right? But to maybe in your own way have your own flock, or to have your own little congregation, and to, for the most part, daily make your rounds and sort of make your connection. So how does that skill set play out at Silver Art? And Jared, do you have moments where you see people, not just the justice impacted artists, kind of coming to Gregory to kind of like get a little different kind of wisdom, that outside of, meet this dealer, meet this collector, meet this sort of nonprofit leader, that underlying thing, if you will, or maybe underlying is not the best term, but you know where I'm going with that. Where does that come into play for the two of you there? Where do you see that play out? Where is that helpful?
It does feel a little bit like a congregation, because these artists are very grateful for this opportunity, and they are there pretty much every day, unless they have to be out of town for something else, and they have their sleeves rolled up and in media res, in the middle of the action of what they're trying to do. There is no culture without cult. And by that I mean there has to be some sort of bedrock that binds us all together. That's what religio means in Latin. It means to bind. It's what brings us together. And there's so very little of that in contemporary society. To the point that Mark Zuckerberg has to say, we're going to create AI friends for you because you can't find them yourselves. And so there is that aspect of grand rounds, or of sort of the St. Francis Assisi model of trying to, I can't change the world, but we do have this incredible gift. So we do want to create a culture. And Johann Herder, the great 19th century linguist, defined culture as the lifeblood of a people, the flow of moral energy that keeps a society intact.
Wow.
And I think that's what we're losing, is the lifeblood of the people, the flow of moral energy, where it truly is this reciprocity of what can I give you that would help you, and what are you offering to the world? Because I grew up in the church, but everybody has, I always say, weird religion, mine, yours, and everybody else's. We all have experience with institutions that have laws and rules and behave like the Vatican, even if it's a finance firm or it's a government agency. And I think that all happens because there is this desperate search for the other. And to me, the great generosity of what I'm able to experience with artists is what Derrida said about faith, which is to take someone at their word is the act of faith par excellence. And so when you can really, really not question why somebody's doing what they're doing, and to help them to say, you're in a safe space to explore this, and to see if there's a there-here path to a sustainable life. as an artist, and that looks like also providing art attorneys to say, "Look, here's how to read contracts or how to set up an LLC." That's something that Warhol was right about, is that there is that element to it, because there's certainly been enough reporting on people that have sort of their stars have quickly ascended in the art world, and then speculators flip their work at Sotheby's and Christie's, and now their floor is here and they can't sustain it over time. That's what any good charity or organization is trying to do, which is, and I say it all the time to people, they're like, well, why should we give money to silver art? You know, you've got, you know, this beautiful space at 4 World Trade Center. And I always say, Jared's heard me say it countless times, the host has to live.
Yeah.
This is not inevitable that, you know, this gift will be here, you know.
Right.
So, you know, it's our obligation to say, let's use this space and show that it's worthy of more space, and then maybe other partners. I think the city is concerned about this. I've been talking to the Department of Cultural Affairs at the city, and they see what's happening at Silver Art, and I think their question is, why is this the only thing of its kind?
Yeah.
Why so many nonprofits are struggling for their existence just because they're trying to pay rent,
Yeah.
which is apocalyptically, you know, expensive, and artists for studio space. I am gobsmacked by what artists have to pay for a 200 square foot box in New York City with mostly often windowless. It's terrible in a city where you have a previous mayor like Michael Bloomberg say, New York City is what it is because of the arts.
Yeah.
That's why New York City is different than everywhere else.
Yeah.
But then where's the evidence that fresh supplies of oxygen are on the way?
I was going to say, where's the awareness of the challenges artists are facing? And then with that awareness, where is the action and support? And to run the risk of doing a little sort of self-promotion here.
No, I would love to actually hear, I would love to hear where Good
briefly.
Standing is
Only
now.
briefly. Well, you mentioned...
Because I've been listening to the podcast, and I'm aware,
Really?
but...
Thank
yeah,
you.
Yes.
Well, the first thing I would say is you mentioned this notion of faith and taking somebody on faith. And, you know, right up here, we have good faith.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the difference between what we maybe mean when we say faith in a religious sense, and then just generally in a more mundane capacity, the day-to-day bodily, political, base reality, good faith. Are you engaging in good faith?
Mm-hmm.
And that to us is the most important thing, it seems, right? Is that like you're making the space to hold one or more ideas in your head at the same time, and you're engaging in good faith, right? So that's sort of foundational for us.
Mm-hmm.
I think if we're going to take the opportunity to talk about
Please.
it, I do want to frame it through you, but I want to throw this to Ashley because, you know, we have this art rapport, but Ashley, maybe speaking a little bit to what this platform means, but maybe with a real strong lens on silver art and these two gentlemen, and also the artist you mentioned who's doing this work with, was it India and
Pakistan.
But also maybe was it the following out of 3 perhaps who was working with a nonprofit? Was it in
yes,
India?
Spandita.
Spandita.
Mm-hmm.
So
you should have her on the show.
She's
amazing.
We would love to speak to many of the artists in the cohort, but where we're a little bit more specified is, do you have an impact element? So it's like a web application which will eventually evolve into a sort of strict get it on a like an app download site or something like that. But it's about recognizing, and we were both positively and somewhat sadly ahead of the curve in terms of, I think you mentioned, a sort of toxic cloud coming over the horizon. You know, Ashley is very insightful, and journalistically I've been somewhat sort of painfully ahead of the curve over and over again. It's a sort of difficult place to be when you have that foresight. But it's this notion that individuals can take part in funding with greater frequency and more flexibility throughout the calendar year. That technology and social media can be gamified and amplified in a positive respect to invite all people to engage with basically impact initiatives, or philanthropy on that sort of interpersonal, the sort of like the micro level, but also can have a major sort of like macro impact. So we're aware of like what Agnes has done. We're aware of what Silver Arts Project is doing. And what we diagnosed out of a venture capital studio that Ashley really launched and sort of brought me in journalistically to do these case studies, where we'd all, the two of us, and had spent a lot of time overseas, but we kind of made a collective decision in like September 23 to really focus on the United States. And we kind of saw the writing on the wall too, in a way that not many people did, to be honest, and understood that technology needed to be built to allow for greater interaction and collaboration at both the most local level, but then also at a global level. So we are building and about to launch Good Standing, a web and mobile application that allows organizations, nonprofits, 501cs, etc., brands, and individuals who we're calling volunteers. And there's a slight variation there within the volunteers. There's like artists and ambassadors, but we invite them to essentially create digital campaigns that have often an IRL component to use and gamify technology to make this impact, both digitally and IRL. So what that would look like is working with Spandita, sorry. Working with Spandita to basically create digital campaigns that bring awareness to, let's say, this nonprofit overseas, while supporting her, funding her, and basically people have profile pages where they're able to display who they're engaged with and who they've been supported. And it's sort of like a gallery where we have what we're calling coupons. Like, this is our like in-house foundational coupon. But the notion is you would create these sort of like digital art pieces that live on your page, your profile page, that's indicative of the individuals and organizations you've supported. And we make it really easy to bring brands, to bring organizations and individuals together in just one cohesive campaign. So the notion is we're trying to scale this up nationwide, but also globally, where people are sort of using social media, using tech, as we call it. You know, tech right now is as disgusting as anything. I'm sorry to say it. But, you know, Ashley and I, in doing these case studies, where we were down in Baltimore, our first one was Farm to School, looking at what people were attempting to do, their struggles at nonprofits, how difficult it was to write grants. We saw what was coming with reduced federal funding. And to be honest, we also saw how much philanthropic funds were misappropriated.
Yes.
Or just completely squandered, or was dubious entirely. You know, like some of like the big NGOs, like you're talking about less than 10, 20% of the money actually landing. So we built something that is a potentially global digital ecosystem, counting for people, organizations, and brands as we move into what we believe is going to be a slightly new paradigm. You know, every day I read articles about, you know, from Microsoft to Netflix to Meta laying off thousands of employees. LinkedIn and all these job sites are AI talking to AI, with people like dying of despair, inflation, wealth disparity. So we're moving into this sort of event horizon point, this beyond inflection point. And I would even maybe challenge you, and certainly Ashley would, to maybe realize that we're maybe past the late capitalism thing, or we're at the last sort of gasp of that. What I would say is maybe there's a sort of new capitalism, or, you know, we just spoke to a gentleman who likes this term mixed economy, which I think makes space for people who have a heart attack when they hear socialism, or,
Yes.
you know, or this mayoral candidate who, you know, is an interesting guy, and we've certainly liked to talk to him. We also believe that people deserve to be compensated for their time and effort. So what good standing would look like is we'd like to collaborate with you guys to figure out a time where people can actually pay to do a tour or go visit an artist individually, or just create a campaign that allows us to sell tickets to an event that maybe we collaborate on, or maybe it just amplifies what you're going to do at the end of the year. So there's so many different ways for us to engage. We're so close to launching this thing that part of me wants to just say, just wait and
Huzzah.
and sort of dictate how you plug in. But it's really a tool, a portal with potentially infinite spokes that allows various organizations, entities, and individuals to engage. When we were down in Baltimore, we saw that they have like 27,000 nonprofits just in Baltimore. And a lot of them are competing for funds.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of them are stepping on each other. A lot of them are struggling to stay afloat. You know, if they get those grants and they actually get to run the thing that they want to do, they don't really have the bandwidth to sustain it for that next year. So they get to the end of that calendar year and they go, oh, shit, we're so busy doing it with what limited funds we have that we didn't have the time to get it. And we don't even know if there are new grants. And can we get the same one again?
Yeah.
And they fizzle and fade.
Yes.
So what we like to do is identify who those organizations are and use our platform to drive attention, drive resources. And the notion is we need a space. We need a sort of collective, national, if not global space where everybody can sort of congregate and start using digital technology in a way that gets this done sort of collectively and allows people to collaborate. So it's both way simpler than that, and that's the work we have to do and are doing on our end to make it simple. But I would also say the possibilities are sort of infinite. So it's like, how do we create something that facilitates all this? Ashley, what do you think? You've been so quiet today.
It's also about ushering in a new culture, which both of you touched on today, in terms of taking action, taking responsibility, and starting to solve problems ourselves. Because when we give away our power, when we defer to these institutions that don't represent us, especially even more so today, or are even actively saying we're not even interested in representing you. You know, I think we're in now the paradigm where the truth behind a lot of this is being revealed.
Yes.
So you have to choose. What do you do now? Do you keep trying to go back to something that actually really wasn't working? Or do you start to engage and build institutions that actually do represent what we want to see, what we do believe in? So for us, it's about creating that tool, that digital platform, which social media could become. It just isn't right now because the people who own those platforms have no interest in this happening, or perhaps the dominant interest.
They may even be
that.
Against it happening.
These platforms are about to disappear because of private networks. You don't even know it yet. Like you're gonna see when these private networks hit, they're gonna make it so that if a person wants to, you guys want to do a podcast and you don't want to stick it on YouTube or whatever other, you can monetize it yourself because it's private.
There's a lot of things we can do with technology now to empower people outside of that existing paradigm. And so we're also trying to be a place where you can filter and go into that new future and choose, are these people, are these organizations acting in a way that aligns with my values? And if they are, how can I get involved with them? And is it my time I can contribute? Do I have resources that I'm able to fund and participate with? And then if I do, can I build some social community around what we're actually doing today? So maybe to kind of wrap it up here, I'd like to kind of say, let's say that we're in this new paradigm, which maybe we're co-creating here, you know? And some program like Silver Art, you know, some program that Jared, I think you're running, or your art practice, you know, walk us through the next like 10, 20 years you've been successful. What do you think that really looks like in terms of the impact that you're able to make now with what is Silver Art starting to pioneer in terms of its ability to create a culture of artists as leaders, not followers, I think you were saying. And what could this Justice Impacted program really amplify?
So, I mean, basically, it's the first and foremost, it's to not be othered, like I said. And the second thing is parity, so the art world doesn't look at them as different or needing to be handled with some kind of, I don't know, some kind of gloves that don't exist because they're justice impacted, So to make that go away. As far as in the big picture is to have, you're saying 10, 20 years from now is for us to be the impetus and the actual motivation for the rest of these property owners to be shamed into putting this exact program into at least one floor of their empty skyscraper. There's 30 Empire State Buildings worth of, right, you told me
Empty commercial real estate in
estate.
Manhattan alone.
Just in Manhattan. So every time I look at the Empire State Building, I multiply it times 30, and I say, oh my God. And I mean, that's an ungodly amount of space that's open. I mean, we've taken care of what we can in Fitty. How about you guys in Midtown? How about you guys in the East Side? Like, there's, they need to be shamed. Brooklyn, there's plenty of skyscrapers in Brooklyn. Why? How is it that we're the only ones? Is what we want to convey and open up them to being more philanthropic. That's would be I'd say I'll go.
And I think the larger dream is this. There's a Greek word perichoresis, which means interlocking, interpenetrating, reciprocity, and so it actually is philanthropy in both directions, because I think one of the things that we've seen at the World Trade Center is that these tenants are just, they maybe didn't know silver art existed. I won't enumerate which businesses or whatever, but they come and they're like, oh, I didn't know this was here. We want to start an art walk program for our employees, because everyone in commercial real estate is trying to figure out, how are we going to get back to where we once were? And the answer is, you're not going to.
I know. Gregory, this is where you look into the camera and tell them
it's not coming back unless you make your values align with your employees' values. And then all of a sudden now they want to come back because there's culture of in the same way that I just defined it as this moral flow that keeps us all together. And then all of a sudden now you have the rising tide that lifts all boats, because it's good for business, because it can't just be completely transactional. People don't want to be robots, and that's why there was this profound revolt during COVID. Like, I do not want to go into the office. And we were recently passing through a town that has like a lot of cheesy tourism in upstate New York, one of these lake towns. And you see these t-shirt shops, and the most prominent t-shirt in the window of this one store said, "My boss told me to have a nice day, and so I took him at his word and went home." And that's where we are. And something like what you're talking about is so important, because there has to be some sort of clearinghouse that allows nonprofits to offload expenses that they don't really need to pay for. I mean, the budgets that these institutions have set aside for development, they're spending gobs of money to bring in money, and it's a broken system. It's a broken system unless you have some sort of once in a generation miracle person that knows how to sweet talk people, and but usually that winds up not being that development person. It winds up being the person at the top, because that's what everybody wants to talk to. So I'm excited about a future in which we can think about something beyond late stage capitalism, because last year Frederick Jameson, the great continental philosopher, passed away, but one of his lines I loved was, it's easier to imagine the apocalypse, like the earth burning to a crisp, than it is to imagine the end of capitalism. So maybe that's not true. Maybe there's some way around this, and so good luck and Godspeed.
Well, thank you guys. Well, Jared, what about you, in the sense that sometimes I look at a piece of art and I go, I understand why this is priceless.
Mm-hmm.
Another time I look at it and go, this ain't worth what the ticker price is saying, and that's my opinion. And then there's times where I'm just really practical and I go, man, this took time, and yeah, rent's expensive, and man, that paint ain't cheap, and the brushes and the thing and the canvas and the stretchy and the transportation and all that stuff right now at least costs money. And man, like sometimes I see a work of art and I go, man, that's a great work of art. Maybe you should kick up that price, right? So I think what we're really thinking about here is like what is value and what is quality in a world, in the art world especially, where it's like it's subjective, or no, wait, is it objective? Is quality a thing? And if so, with quality, is there value? Who decides, right? Understanding at all these different layers how important artists are to society, how important artists are to maintaining the fabric of civilization, not just the cultural realm, right? Like the rivers running through the infrastructure, right? Because we're interested in both here, right? Where it's like we're interested in infrastructure and civics generally, but we also deeply understand the culture that runs through that. So, Jared, I want to throw this to you to take us out, you know, or a guy who's, you know, been on a journey as a kid, as a young adult, as the still young adult right now. What does it mean for a painting, for an art object to have value in a system that currently has serious problems that are we're literally at the breaking point in terms of the problems inherent in our current system? Yeah. But these paintings have value. How do you navigate that? What does that mean to you? That this thing, we have to operate in this system, or we don't have to operate in the system, but we all know when we're in front of a great work of art that, damn, that thing is special, you know, and it's not everyone, and it's certainly not maybe the majority even though it all has value in its own way, right? That macaroni plate you made in kindergarten, ask your mom if that's got value. It might be her most valuable possession, you know what I mean? Maybe I'm speaking just from my mom. My macaroni plate. You know, my macaroni plate was amazing. Let's be real. But Jared, talk to us just a little bit about value and what we value in society, and what it means for you to maybe put a price tag on a painting, or, you know, maybe like a nonprofit comes to you, somebody else's thing, and goes, hey, Jared, can you donate a painting to this thing, right? Like, what does that mean in that moment?
Been there, done that.
Right? So just take us out, Jared, with like the big, like the macro value, what has value, do artists have value in society, and what it means to you to put a price tag on a painting, which has all this emotion, this history, and this time, this effort.
You know, the value is mostly generated by the other person and what they get from what they see. I can't prescribe a value to the work based on my wants or desires. It would be wrong. Some things that I might make may be less valuable to me, they'll feel less valuable to me, but somebody else will see them and say, oh my God, that's incredible to me. So it's subjective, first and foremost. And I believe that when society starts valuing art more than it already does, and when when society leaves culture alone, then art flourishes, and then it has the greatest value ever, you know? And we've seen this incidents before where the CIA actually funded all of the abstract expressionists, which is super weird.
You had to stick it to them overseas, you know, show them what's
just
up.
Just because they wanted to create this new genre and, you know, the whole modernist art thing. And I think that, you know, the value is going to be given by what the society values. Right, so society's values and what they deem as precious is what's going to ultimately give things a value. So that's why it's important, like we were saying, to cultivate the next generation of collector, somebody that will see value and ascertain and just put value on things. You know, sometimes the value has to be placed by somebody else. You know, you don't know what something's worth. You need somebody that knows more than you to come in and say, this is worth this because of that. You know, and I'm not against that. I think that that's an important thing. Some things are obviously going to be more valuable, and I see pieces of work. I go into Jack Whitten at the moment. It's like I want to pass out because there's so much value there. You know, it's so rich. It's like eating 1,000 pieces of dark chocolate at one time.
I've done that.
Yeah.
It's not just for breakfast anymore.
But that's how art should make you feel. It should make you, you know, like I look at one of those Jack Whittens, and I would never, I know I can't afford one, and I know I would never offer somebody who had one $10,000 for it. I wouldn't offer them. I know it's worth way more than that because of the backdrop. The backstory is everything. You know, the rejection of him, his story, the rejection. That's the value. Is the backstory.
Yeah.
It's not the physical. It's not the painting itself. It's the human being behind it. That's what people have to understand. Sometimes you'll see terrible art. It's just like people want it because it's like, damn, this motherfucker made it.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, and they want it. People like that's again people adding value to it. But sometimes things are like you can't put a value on them. You know, there's artifacts that you can't put a value on them, like because you can't make them again. And there's paintings that you can't. That are to me that are perfect. Like I look at them like, damn, this thing is perfect. Like makes me want to not even paint anymore. Like I can't even get to this. Like it's super hard. But you don't stop because of that. You keep going, and then somebody will add value to what you're doing. That's it.
I have one little tag question.
Yeah.
And maybe the two of you guys do this all the time, but was there a moment, sort of inside maybe, where somebody said, not just, oh, cool or not so cool, but maybe even earlier where someone went, yo. And what I'm sure was a difficult time. Did anybody ever come around and give you like a little push?
I would sell works in prison. I sold abstracts. I have abstracts. I have ceramics all over. I have ceramics that I did in the Caribbean, California, New York, all over the place. So these guys put value, and they wouldn't even dare. That's a perfect example, Kurt, is guys seeing a vase or something I do and saying, how much you want for that? And me saying, how much you want to give me for it?
Right.
You know, and then them saying, and then us agreeing, then us coming to an agreement. So it's like the handshake. Like, you know, you need this interaction to create value, you know, in the end. So I've, you know, inside, it's just like out here, you know, you might not agree with what somebody says the value is, and then you want to keep it. Or the value might increase because times change and the story changes, the narrative has changed, and now the piece is more relevant. You know, like Wozniak, right? What happens? All these years go by and everybody looks at him now. He's a god because he was. But at that time, only certain few people saw the value in the work.
Yeah.
So now it had to take another generation for people. Basquiat, another prime example. What's the value of the work? It was this value when he was selling. Everybody's going crazy buying it. Now it's Titan value because it deserves to be because of the human behind it, the story.
Yeah.
You know,
Gregory, is there a moment? It's probably been a million, where you're moving through the cohort, you're moving through the space, and somebody goes, this work is terrible, I just want to junk it, I want to restart it, or I'm just not feeling it, and you kind of give them that little push, and maybe that work flies, that work soars. Give me like maybe a recent example, or just generally how you navigate moments of like uncertainty in the cohort, and you give that little push, that little word, those words of encouragement, to whether in an individual piece or the whole practice, where somebody's experiencing the pressure, the crunch, or they feel uninspired. Give me something there to officially take us out. Those moments where you step in and in your way, and whatever way that is, and I have an idea. But tell us a little bit about those moments where you say, hey, no, there's something here.
I always will remind an artist when they're at a low point that you've made something out of nothing. And that's something that most people have never done before in terms of actually staring. I mean, last night, perfect example, Jared took a photo and of an empty canvas, and he said, the scariest feeling in the world.
No doubt. The white page, as we call it.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
And I won't say the name because I don't want to single out an artist or speak for their story. But we had an artist last year who had sort of initially had success in a certain discipline, but realized it was not a trajectory to be on, and really took this moment at Silver Art it was sort of stuck where she was at the time. And I just brought, it wasn't just me, but bringing in people. I know people that are going to get what you're about. Mm-hmm. Just keep talking it out. And over the course of the year, it just became this entire new body of work that she would have never said this is what it's going to be about, from the beginning until the end. And she just wrapped a solo show, her first solo show ever, of work that would not have been had she not, and it's just not just me, but everybody else cheerleading and saying, you have got something special here. And sometimes that's all you need, is just that one word of encouragement, to keep going. Because, as Bob Dylan said on Time Out of Mind, it's not dark yet, but it's getting there. And every time an artist succeeds, it's streams of white light in darkened corners. It is stained glass in a person. It's what the light shines through. And we are really, really honored to be on the pod, and excited to see what's next for Good Standing.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks,
Thank
y'all.
you.
Thanks.
Thanks.